What up? We're talking about how I made this landing page. What up? I'm Duncan, software developer. Today we're going to be talking about HTMX, Ruxt.rs, and Three.js. There's too many dots. Well, let's get into it. So just taking a look over what I built. You see here, this is just a landing page for a website I'm working on. It's called Pathfinders. It's going to be a tech learning site, content stuff. Anyway, that's unimportant. The thing we're looking at today is all of these kind of elements. So if you're not familiar, there's a couple of resources that we are using here today. First, we've got HTMX. So HTMX is a hypermedia framework. The goal is to basically simplify building front ends, let you use these DOM elements in order to make requests and change the layout of the website. Then you've got Ruxt. This is a Rust framework, a web framework that I'm actually building. So then there's Three.js, and Three.js is a 3D JavaScript library. It lets you construct 3D objects and move cameras around just like you would in other programs like something like Blender, except you do it programmatically and you can update things using JavaScript. I have toyed around with the idea of using Three.js in the past. I've only used it in a couple places, but when I was designing this landing page, I really thought it could be a cool look. So let's jump over to my design. So I started initially kind of going for more this vibe, like heavy gradients. I ended up playing around a little bit and came up with more of this kind of simplified line vibe. Pathfinders to me kind of invokes space and kind of dark, cool, techie things. And so my goal was to try and convey that in the design. I'm not a designer. This stuff's really hard for me. I'm very happy with how this turned out though. So this was the logo I ended up going with, just basically a simple 4-pointed star in the red. So I spent some time and I laid out this as a landing page. But what I figured is I did want to do something else with this 4-pointed star, and I thought this would be a cool place to implement Three.js. I could actually figure out how to use the thing. Like I said, I've toyed around with it for so long. Most of this is just regular HTML and CSS. In fact, everything except for the star here is HTML and CSS. It uses Tailwind. It's not really important information for you to know. What I didn't want to do any modeling. I'm trying to take things one step at a time. I've done some modeling, very basic modeling a long time ago, but I didn't really want to tackle that first. So after a little bit of Googling, I did find this 4-point star model by Jessica Servin Dominguez. I hope I said that right, but shouts out. It's exactly what I was looking for, a 4-point star with just a little bit of dimension. And so I think it's time, let's jump over to the code. Let's go look at the code. So this project, as I said, is a Ruxt project. That means that all of my routes are defined with this pages directory. This is an Actix framework, but I've built a file-based router on top of it. You see here that the index of this is actually incredibly simple. It's literally just, I'm using this to render the HTML basically at this point. So we don't really need to worry about the Rust portion of this at this point. Looking over here at the HTML, you'll see that it's fairly simple. I mean, it looks like a Tailwind project with just classes everywhere spewed all over the page. But at the end of the day, it's not particularly complicated. This little SVG right here is the logo. Here, this is the title, and the input is down here contained in a different file, just so I can switch some stuff out when I need to. This is kind of the portion that we're focused on, this canvas element. So you don't technically need to add a canvas element here. You can do it programmatically using JavaScript, but I like having this canvas element there as a reference for me. That makes styling a little bit easier. Basically, I know where that canvas element is going to end up after I run my query. So here, I'm going to jump up to my scripts folder. So this script is only, I think, 120 lines long. Yeah, this isn't a particularly complex script. So up here, you'll see we're importing Three and FBX loader. So that file that I showed you earlier, the 4-point star, is a FBX file. So I needed to be able to import that in order to actually bring the 3D object in. This is kind of a hack. This is sort of the JavaScript equivalent of media queries, I guess you could kind of say. Here we define a scene and a light. I actually don't know if I need these, if I'm honest, because I copied some of this out of an example, but I'm too afraid to get rid of them. So they stay there, at least the lights. The scene we obviously need. This is how you declare a collection of objects and a camera and things. So here we define a camera. I ended up going with a 35 FOV. We set the camera's position here. This basically, I just shift it back a little bit away from the object. And then here I turn on an alpha background. That just makes the background transparent. This is a renderer, and so we set the size to the width and height. This is what actually manages rendering the scene. So here, like I talked about earlier, I've got a canvas element already on the DOM, and I grab that canvas element's parent. I do some conditional stuff here. Basically, when we do this replace child, we are dropping in the proper canvas. This renderer DOM element is actually a canvas with a 3D engine behind the scenes modifying the canvas. So then down here is where things get a little bit strange, or the code maybe looks a little bit strange. So we instantiate a FBX loader, and this is just a object that's responsible for loading the actual 3D file. Here you see that I placed my 3D object at static models 4.star.fbx. And then all of this in here is actually just applying some styling, basically. So here we set the scale of the object, we set the initial rotation of the object. I don't even know that I need this, but that's fine. We set this loaded object, which we declared outside of this scope. This is so I can do some rotations later. We'll see that in just a second. And then here, this object.traverse, I'm gonna be honest, I don't fully understand what all is happening here. I just know that I needed to do it in order to apply some of the materials to this object. First, we check whether or not it is a instance of 3 mesh. Again, I don't fully understand what's going on there. It's just what I saw on the internet and it worked. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm applying transparency and a 0 opacity to each of the faces of the object. My goal was to get rid of all of the faces because the 3D object actually came with faces on each of the sides. But I didn't want those. I just wanted the kind of cool red line effect. And so here I'm iterating over all of the objects and I'm setting them to transparent and giving them a 0 opacity. Then down here we're declaring a new edges geometry. This lets me apply this red color here to each of the edges in the 3D object, and we add that value to child. Again, I don't know what that means. At the end here, we add the object to the scene. So we chuck it in. Now it's visible in the scene, or it will be when we call render. Down here, this function is just responsible for resizing the canvas when the screen resizes so that things don't break like crazy. And finally, we get to the part that actually does the thing. So this request animation frame function will recall this animate function, whatever's passed to it, every frame. And so what I'm doing is on every frame, I check whether or not we've loaded the object, and then I'm adding 0.003 to the z-axis rotation. So that gives us the effect that we see in the final result of just kind of that slow turning of the 3D model. And then we call the render function, which actually renders the scene to the canvas, basically. Three.js does some stuff under the hood, calculates whatever with the camera and the objects and the lights, and then renders it to the canvas. And at the end here, we just call the animate function. When the module is loaded on the HTML page, it starts to do the animations. So with all of that, we get this kind of cool, rotatey 3D object. It wasn't actually particularly complicated. There's a lot of resources online to tell you how to accomplish this. I know that there is a course that I actually have. This is a really cool course by this guy named Bruno Simon. Teach you how to actually do a lot more complicated things in Three.js. I mean, you see here, this is one example. He's got this really cool layout of what all happens in the course, what all you learn. And you see here, there's interactions. He's got a laser burning over stuff. So if you're interested in learning any of this stuff, I think that Three.js is complicated, that a course might be appropriate to get started. And yeah, reach out if there's any questions you have. I don't know too much about this stuff, but I'm willing to help out however I can. And thanks for watching. This is I did a thing.